Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jordan with the Laundromat Resource Podcast. This is show 149, and I'm pumped you're here today because today we have on the show Mike Mans, who brings the heat today. We talk about a lot of really great stuff, ton of practical laundromat information, obviously, but also in addition to that, we talk to some ancillary, supplementary income streams like car washes, tanning beds, other stuff. It's a really cool episode with Mike. So a huge shout out to Mike for coming on and sharing his story and the wisdom and knowledge that he has gained. This is a super good episode. Real quick before we jump into it with Mike, I wanted to bring something up because I get asked questions all the time about how to buy a laundromat. A lot of people dealing with fear of running into a situation like I did when I bought my first laundromat, where this is a cash business and there's a lot of potential gotchas that you can run into buying your first cash business. So if you are somebody who's in that situation, you're looking to buy your first laundromat, you want to make sure you buy it right the first time. I put together a course based on my knowledge that I've gathered and hard earned through my experience in the industry, but also through talking to hundreds and hundreds of other owners, brokers, distributors, et cetera in this industry. And I put together everything you need to know, not just the knowledge, but also you get full access to the tools and documents you need to actually make sure you understand what you're buying before you actually buy it and to have all the tools necessary to actually do it and close on that deal and become a laundromat owner. So if that's something that interests you, check out laundromatresource.com/courses, or the link is in the show notes at laundromatresource.com/show 149. Or if you're on YouTube, it's down below. So check that out. And right before we jump into it with Mike Mans, just a quick word from our sponsor.
What's up, laundromat owners? This is Gabe here from BMR with today's quick marketing tip. Today, I want to talk to you about something crucial yet often overlooked, and that's the power of branding. In a world where choices abound, a strong, recognizable brand sets you apart. It's not just about creating a logo or a catchy name. It's about creating an identity that resonates with your customers. Think about some of the most successful businesses out there. Names like Nike, Coke, Apple, they all have one thing in common, and that's a distinct brand. This is what we aspire to. Your brand is your story, your values, and the promise you make to your customers. It's what they recall when they think of a pleasant, reliable experience. It's that familiar feeling they get, the one that says, this is a place I trust and enjoy coming to. A strong brand goes beyond the physical aspects of your laundromat. It's how you communicate the quality of the service you provide and how you engage with your community. It creates an emotional connection, turning first-time visitors into loyal customers. In the digital age, your brand extends online as well. It's how you present yourself on social media, your website, and marketing materials. Invest in your brand. Be consistent in your messaging, thoughtful in your customer interactions, and intentional in creating an atmosphere that's uniquely yours. By developing a strong, recognizable brand, you're not just doing laundry, you're creating an experience, one that customers will seek out and they'll remember. This is key to standing out in a crowded market and ensuring the long-term success of your business. So for more free information about how to brand your laundromat, visit us at buildwithbmr.com/help-me-brand.
Mike, how are you doing, man? Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. Super excited to have you on and to hear your story. And I kind of want to I know like a little bit about you. So I want to kind of get a little bit of background on you. Who are you? And then let's get into how you got into this industry. But tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a 40-year-old dad from Minnesota. I'm a mechanical engineer by degree. So I went to college, did the whole 5-year experience for somebody like me that likes to drag their feet a little bit. And when I was in college, I got into rental real estate a little bit. And so that was kind of my dip my toe in the water for small business, kind of entrepreneurial side, and did that for a long time. And then it just kind of snowballed into something totally unexpected. And I made a pretty big pivot a couple of years ago and got into this laundromat world.
Yeah, well, we need to talk about that pivot here in a second. But I also know that there's a little, you've got like a racing streak in you here. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So my family has been into drag racing since before I came along. And so I was born into it, raised into it, and spent most of my life around race cars. And so we drag race cars in the summertime. That's kind of our hobby, our passion. And so we travel all primarily around the Midwest, but when we're having good seasons, we'll travel our way out west, chasing points and things like that. So, we live in the Minnesota area, Minneapolis suburbs. And so we race a lot in Minnesota, Chicago, St. Louis, Kansas, that kind of area around the Midwest. But it's not uncommon for us to venture out to Vegas, Sonoma, Pomona, California, some of those areas. So yeah, we put some miles on.
I grew up right across the street from the Pomona drag race strip where they do the Winter Nationals. And literally during race season, we'd have to take all the pictures off our walls because our house would vibrate from those races. So pretty cool.
Yeah. Pomona's for us in the drag racing world, it's kind of a magical place. It's where, some of the birthplace of our sport. And it's a really neat place to be. It's fun. It's weird being in town. The most racetracks, you're way out of the city somewhere in Pomona.
Yeah.
When you drive down the return road and you could pretty much swing into In-N-Out on the way back. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, what's real great about it, I don't know if it's still like this, but when I was growing up, especially after I got my license, there's a road that runs parallel, like right next to the drag strip. So you could actually go drive along with the drag racers. Next to them. That was pretty cool.
Yep, still there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's pretty cool. I don't know if like someday we need to figure out how to do throw some motors in top load washers or something and race those around or something like that. But there's got to be something there.
There's got to be a way to compete with these things.
That's right. That's right. That's awesome. Well, very cool about the drag racing background. I saw on Facebook some of that stuff, and I was like, oh man, we got to talk a little bit about that because I love cars too and drag racing. Although I'm not into it as much as you guys are. But okay, so let's go back to your background here. You kind of casually mentioned you made a pivot into laundromats. How did that pivot into laundromats come about?
It was a strange turn. So I bought my first house in college. And so this is and back at that point in time, I know you're in the real estate world even today, but back then you could see why the real estate crash happened. I mean, things were pretty unfortunately loose, and I was wise enough, I guess, to take advantage of it at that point. And so they had stated income loans, and I was a college student. And I was able to get a mortgage on a home, and I knew I had it already rented before I got into it. So I was pretty comfortable with the payment situation. And so that's how it started. I got into a home, fixed it up, added some bedrooms and bathrooms, created some rental and income. And I slowly grew it. I mean, I was going to school to be a mechanical engineer, but I knew, I wanted to have some side income outside of whatever was going to be my day job when that time came. And so it was a slow growth. I mean, it was just me. I wasn't willing to, invest other people's money or borrow to the hills, that kind of thing. So it was a slow, progressive thing. And so at the end, around 2020, 21, I think, I had 5 single-family homes and 2 duplexes. And during the pandemic, I, knock on wood, and thankfully, I really didn't get burned by some of the rules and regulations that were put into place with protecting the renter side. But I grew immensely uncomfortable with how I felt like it was really siding with the renters. And from a landlord's perspective, I really didn't have a leg to stand on. If they didn't pay their rent, there was nothing I could do about it. And in a lot of states like Minnesota, if somebody wasn't paying rent, you couldn't evict them. There was really nothing you could do. And so I felt like, okay, this is not comfortable having, 7 mortgages that at any point in time, people could just decide to, leave me high and dry, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I got to a point where, and all these properties were 2 hours away from where I live now. And so I was looking for some type of business to get into. And probably like most of your listeners, I looked through Biz Buy Sell, Sunbelt. I looked through every business listing. I drugged my wife around to every possible thing I could find. We went to Subway stores, liquor stores. I was looking at anything that was a viable option. And I kind of stumbled into laundromats. And I was at Christmas, family Christmas, And a cousin of mine reminded me of this guy we went to high school with. And they said, oh, well, he bought a couple laundromats. You should see what he thinks about them. And so after Christmas, maybe a month or two goes by, and I give this guy a call out of the blue. I think I found him on Facebook and said, hey, do you want to meet up for a beer? I'd love to hear about these laundromats. And so we meet up, start having some beers, and he and his wife purchased a dry cleaners after college. So they were familiar with the laundry world. They had a dry cleaning business for, 10 years or more, and ran it successfully. And a few years before the pandemic came along, he was just burned out on the business, the employees, some of the facets of the dry cleaning side, saw the demand for dry cleaning starting to taper off in some of the markets that they were serving. And so he sold it, and he was completely exited from it, went to work for one of their equipment suppliers. And so that kind of kicked the door open to this coin laundry side. And he bought a couple laundromats. And then so we talked a bit about them. And thankfully, he calls on a lot of laundromats. And he knows a lot of the owners, people that have been in the game for a long time. And he knew people that were starting to look at the next phase of their life, looking at retiring, looking at selling locations. And he brought up a pair of sites that he said they're way over my head. They're way over, something I want to get involved in. It's, that'd be like a 5-year, 10-year thing down the road. So we talked more and more about it, started looking into it. And I had never had intentions of being in a partnership, and he didn't either. And I said, but I can bring in some capital because I think we're going to sell all these properties. You know a lot about this business. So what do you think about doing a partnership? So long story short, we ended up jumping in with both feet. We bought 2 sites. Each site has laundromats and car washes. And one of the sites also has tanning beds. And so, we kind of jumped in feet first and figured out how to swim after that.
That's the best way to do it. Jump in feet first, and then that literally, that's how I learned how to swim. My aunt threw me in the deep end of my grandma's pool. I learned I was 3 years old that way. So
yeah,
you don't die, then you're going to be a strong swimmer,
Yeah, you figure it out.
50-50 shot, but only the strong survive.
Yeah, we didn't have to come up for air too many times, and we made it pan out.
That's good.
So yeah, that was the start.
Yeah. Okay. So interesting. Okay. So you weren't really intending to partner on a business or anything, but you ended up doing that. How's that? Are you guys still partners today?
Yeah. Yeah. So we got those 2 sites. We have since acquired a third, strictly a laundromat. And then kind of in the middle of all those, my wife and I also bought another standalone laundromat on our own. So I'm half partner in 3 sites, and then my wife and I own one together.
Nice.
So,
all right. So I want to go back because, this I find is much more common, I think, in the Midwest than on the coast, but buying a laundromat with like car wash and tanning beds. I want to actually talk about both of those things along with it, and obviously the laundromats. So let's start with the laundromats, and then maybe we can work our way through and hear a little bit about these. What kind of were these performing laundromats? What kind of condition were they in when you took them over?
Yeah, so coming in green, I didn't know what I didn't know, like many people do when they buy the first one. And the buyer that we got these from, his financial records were incredibly horrible. It was like, here's what this location does, and I think kind of the split is. Here's what the other location does, and I think kind of the split is there. So the record keeping was poor. But it was all at least verified with tax returns. And so we could say confidently that the sites did that in revenue. And so I wasn't super concerned about, making payments, so to speak, but I was completely clueless as far as the performance of each component within the organization. So once we got in, it was really put in some real point of sale equipment, start gathering real traceable data on machines, locations, what each thing did, and kind of divvy it up into, we've got a tanning business, we've got a self-serve laundry business, we've got self-serve car washes, we've got touchless automatic bay car washes, and then we do a little bit of wash, dry, fold as well. And so then it was, all right, let's let's just get some data. Let's get us a couple months into this thing, figure out what a baseline is and where we're at, and then start making some decisions moving forward. And so the laundromats, they're both in the same town. They're the only two laundromats in town. One's on the north side, one's on the south side. And you have, it's a town of about 15,000 people. And so you've got a demographic it's a different demographic on each end of the town. You've got more living and owner-based homes on the north side of town, and more apartments and renter-based clients on the south side of town. So our mix is a little bit shifted. We do a little bit more self-serve on the south side of town, but we do a little bit more wash, dry, fold, some of that stuff on the north end of town. So it was, they're okay performing laundromats, but in terms of equipment, we knew when we got into it that we were buying some pretty old stuff. Part of the whole buy process was we acquired all the real estate as well. And so that was as important to me as any of it, getting the buildings, making sure that we've got a good foundation so that when we start investing, it's something that we are confident is going to stay there. The laundry did okay, and we're slowly growing it, but it's interesting the amount of investment when you're looking at all these different businesses. You wish you just had money coming out of your ears because you could spend all of it. You could upgrade everything and try and improve every facet of the business. But when we got in, everything was strictly coin. They did take credit cards at the car wash, like the touchless bays where you pull in and it does everything for you. But all the self-serve was coin only. All the laundry was coin only. And so that's things that we're slowly starting to transition at those locations.
Do you have to put any new like laundry equipment into the laundromats, or
we did stuff? Yeah. So all of our at one location, it had a bunch of old top loads, and like all of them, they just start falling off, and they're pretty degraded and poorly kept. So we replaced all the top loads with just small chassis front load Maytags. The other site had replaced half of the top loads, and we still got a couple of them left there that we're slowly kind of chipping out. As far as like bigger equipment, though, we've installed a few new big washers, but all of at one site, we didn't replace anything with new. We've just slowly acquired age-specific equipment of the same model and design and replaced them in that location. Because I think that was one thing that, although my business partners in the sales of selling new equipment, I think we both really agree that there's certain markets that really don't justify the cost of putting in brand new equipment. I mean, you may raise your business a little bit. You might see some uptick in sales and revenue. But at the end of the day, new equipment right now is so expensive that if you're not in the right market, if it's a little bit oversaturated, I think it's always worth your interest in at least seeing what's out there for used equipment, because there's some good stuff out there.
Yeah, and especially when you're the only two games in town, really. Right? Yeah. There's not a whole lot more to gain, or you can pull from one to the other, but that doesn't really help you. Right. So yeah.
Yeah. So you try and pull from some of the neighboring towns, but at the same time, it's very incremental. Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, what's your as the only two in town, what's you said that you're slowly growing the businesses. Where's the growth coming from? Is it coming from neighboring towns? Is it coming from kind of out in the the rural areas, or where's that coming from?
I think we do pull from some of the neighboring towns because it's definitely out out in the countryside a little bit, and so we pull from some of the neighboring towns that they have really bad laundromats. They've got really poor options in front of them, and so they do like to come somewhere. One of our sites is attended most hours that we're open, and so people really like that, especially the older clientele. They like being somewhere that's always picked up, always clean. There's always somebody there to help them if something's going wrong. There's campgrounds half an hour away, things like that we pull from. The biggest thing that's been a challenge to me is that it's in an area where there has historically been a lot of seasonal workers. So you'll have poultry plants or farms, big, huge farms that bring in hundreds of people seasonally. And historically, we would get all of that laundry need and a lot of that capacity being really rise us up kind of in the April through October timeframe. But given the economy in the last couple of years, a lot of that's really tapered off. And so we've focused more on growing our ability to serve the market that we have a little bit better. Although I openly admit there's a lot of opportunity that we haven't yet captured and really tried to do better at, for lack of a better term. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a process, right? You got to start with what you got and try to build smartly, right? And I think, having that, owning the real estate and then just making smart, methodical moves is the way to go. Are you focusing at all on growing the drop-off services?
It's definitely something that I'm going to put into place here in the next couple of months. And so really a little bit more of the backstory. I worked in mechanical engineering and product management for the entirety of my career. And I worked at a big corporate company for 9 years. Loved it. Loved the people I worked with. And, like a lot of big companies in the last couple of years, we saw huge peaks right after the COVID pandemic kind of tapered off. And then you see some of the things kind of normalizing. And unfortunately, when that happens, boards of directors and everybody want to see the expenses become more normalized with the incomes. And so I was part of a layoff in the end of January, beginning of February. And so my wife and I had a lot of conversations around when does this become the full-time thing? Because I really had probably too much on my plate for a while, trying to run all these stores and laundromats and things, and while still having a full-time job and kids and personal hobbies and all that other stuff. So it was really kind of coming to a head, and I got the gift of them making a decision for me, so I didn't have to think about it anymore. And so that trigger was pulled. And so at the beginning of February, I'm self-employed for full-time. And so now I've been fortunate to have a lot of mechanical and hands-on experience with things. So I'm comfortable fixing things and doing as much as I can on my own. And so I've been spending a lot of time at our sites trying to do all the maintenance and the things that you've kind of, I'll get to it tomorrow kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And but as a part of that, we expanded our tanning capacity, and that's been going really well. And it's a weird adjacency. But at the location that it's in, we always had attendants. And so we always had somebody there to sell wash, dry, fold. We always had somebody there to help our customers. And, we didn't do that much wash, dry, fold at that location, but we always had 3 tanning beds. And so ironically, some of the competitors in town closed their doors last summer, and our tanning business just kind of went through the roof. And I looked at that like, well, let's jump on this bandwagon while it's here, add some more capacity. And our people that would always be doing our wash, dry, fold service are never standing still right now. We're in this season where, I don't know if it's this way in Southern California, but everybody's looking for, we're going on winter breaks, we're going on spring breaks, we're going on trips. And so out in this part of the country, people are tanning a lot. And so our staff is pretty much full throttle taking care of the tanning and the wash, dry, fold that we have. And so I'm kind of wanting to wait till that season tapers off a little bit to really start trying to drive out what does wash, dry, fold look like at those locations, and how do we grow it without really aggravating my staff.
Yeah, right. Just keep heaping things on their plate. And see how much they can handle. Yeah, that's probably not a good strategy. Well, it's funny. I mean, I was intrigued by the tanning side of things because I was talking with John Schimmel, who was on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he was just buying some laundromats that had tanning. And when we were talking, at least, he was saying, I think I'm just going to get rid of these things. And I don't know if he ended up doing that or not. I'll have to swing back by and find out with him. But when you said that, I was like, oh, that's intriguing. And, wanted to know like how those things are performing. So it's kind of interesting that they're going through the roof right now.
It's a weird little business. And I think, every region's got its own kind of niche and their own demand for something like that. But in reality, they're pretty inexpensive. We buy really nice, either like factory reconditioned beds or things like that. So, a bed that you may spend $5,000 or $6,000 on, and you're going to build out a room around it or have some way to, create that privacy change experience for them. you might be all into something for like $10,000, and the amount of margin on something like that is incredible. And we're not expensive. I mean, I think our premium bed is like $12 a session. And every Monday we have BOGO Mondays, and the place is packed from the time the doors open to the time they close. And so it does really well. The margins on lotions are fantastic. If I could sell lotions every day with or soaps with the amount of margin we make on tanning lotion, I think we could retire. But it's an awesome business for me because I already have staff there. And I think for anybody that's looking at having an attended store, if the market fits it, it's a great complement to having your staff there, because you already have some customers that are going to be there doing laundry. And so if they can, pop in and get a quick tanning session in while their laundry's in process, we certainly have a bit of our customers that do that. But there is, I would say by and large, the general customer base is a little bit different, but I think that's good. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to expand our wash, dry, fold business and creating those complementary customer needs. Because I think a lot of your customers that are coming in, because they're going to go on vacation, those are customers that are probably busy. They got families and kids, and they could have an opportunity to offload some of that chore of doing laundry. So you can really create some cross promotions and incentives for your tanners to drop off their laundry when they come in. So I think there's great opportunity there for both of those components of the business that I'm really excited to try and explore and grow for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's such a funny little niche there where you've got, tanning going on, and you're selling the lotions and stuff, and then you've got your laundry and car wash there. But I mean, in a lot of ways it makes sense. Are the tanning beds, do you have them at both locations in that town, or just the north?
One.
Is it the north?
Yep. Yep.
Because that's the higher income homeowner demographic.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yep. A little bit more of the homeowner on that end of town. And granted, the town's not huge, so it doesn't take, you can drive across town in 10 minutes, but I'd say the median income is a little bit higher on that end of town. And that's the store that's a little bit bigger footprint. We already had staff there. And so it works out pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. I'm assuming the higher income is the demographics. Is there anything else that you've noticed, like in terms of demographics of what would make a good location for tanning? Surprisingly,
in the Minnesota area, at least, once you think about it and look around for them, there's a lot of tanning businesses still operating. And I've gotten to know one of the gentlemen that owns a lot of the locations in the Midwest, in the Minnesota metro area. And, he's really optimistic. He feels strong that the market is still pretty strong, that the demand is still there. And it's, for me, I never really knew that market existed. And so it's been as much as any of this stuff, it's been a real learning curve trying to figure out how to make sure you're making the right decisions. But in terms of a profile of who's coming into tan, it is the strangest thing to me, because you'll see, young high school girls coming in because they're getting ready to go to prom or their dances. And then you've got, a 60-year-old construction worker wearing the yellow vest popping in because he and his family are going to Mexico in a week. And so it's the whole gamut of people that are going to come in and utilize that service. So it's great and a little bit difficult to figure out how do you market to those people as you're trying to expand. But right now we're in kind of a gift phase where we're growing just because we're the only game in town.
Yeah, dude, that's so funny. All right, proposal for you and me, tanning bed resource podcast.
There you go. I think it'd be the first.
There's probably, it probably would be a first. That's funny, but that's very cool. I mean, listen, I was on a long time ago, a couple of years ago, I was on another podcast called The Side Hustle Show. And one of the things I was saying about laundromats is they can be the ultimate side hustle. You can work a full-time job and own laundromats, right? But then that side hustle can have multiple side hustles within the side hustle, right? Like ATMs, vending machine, tanning beds, massage chairs, on and on and on, right? So it is interesting to try to find those synergies that make sense in your market of, if people are coming in to do their laundromat anyways, or their laundry anyways, like what can they do with that time, where you can kind of monetize that time and do double duty basically, or you can pull in a whole new demographic and then be able to, like you were saying, cross-sell them on the services that you have too. It's a demographic that might be interested in that drop-off laundry. So I think that's smart. I know you stumbled into it, but I'm still going to give you intelligence points for keeping it around and growing it. So
thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. What about the car washes? I mean, a lot of times laundromats and car washes, they get mentioned in the same sentence. How are those car washes doing?
Car washes is, personally, I think it's as fun or more fun in some instances than the laundry side. Just because I'm a car guy, I think they're fun. It's fun to look at the options and things that we can do to make that experience better for the customer, provide a better product. The equipment is like laundry. It's pretty expensive. It's a lot to install. Generally speaking, if you're going to put in like an in-bay automatic, that whole touchless system, you're if you buy a nice, like a pre-used, reconditioned model, and after install, I mean, you're going to be at least 150 grand into the thing. So it's not super cheap. But if you got the good equipment and you got a good vendor, much like the laundry side, if you got a good vendor that you're working with for your chemicals and your service side, they can run pretty well. I think the best bang for your buck is self-serve car washes, to be honest. They're pretty simple. They're pretty easy to fix. And you're selling time. Like everybody's just plunking a quarter in for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever your market rate is. And you're just selling time. You just want them to keep feeding that meter. And so, you install credit card readers with count up, where it's great. They walk in, slide in their card, start the timer, and it just counts up. And whenever they're done, they can come hit stop. And it relieves that urgency of you're halfway through your car and you hear this thing beeping on the other side of the room and you're running to grab quarters and fill them in. And so I think it allows customers to feel more comfortable in your environment. It gives them a little bit of an opportunity to, from a business perspective, they're going to spend a little bit more. Their ticket's going to be a little bit higher, but they don't feel so rushed and they don't feel so kind of under the gun, so to speak. So self-serve car washes, I think, are great. And part of the reason I really like self-serve car washes is it doesn't seem to be as corporately desired as automatic car washes. We've all seen the explosive growth of Misters, Tommy's, Express, Camel Wash, all those big chains that are popping up stores on literally every street corner in a busy town. And that makes the in-bay automatics or the touchless car wash systems, it makes it a little bit more competitive. It makes it a little bit more challenging to draw those customers in because, a typical environment for a touchless car wash, somebody's going to drive up and every car in front of them is going to be 5 minutes. Whereas if you pull into a tunnel, every car in front of you is like 10 seconds. So you're trying to balance your investment for how much time people are going to wait. And so I like them both, but I think, if somebody's looking to get into it, self-serve car washes they're a great little business. You can do pretty well with them for the amount of investment you got to put in, for sure.
Do you get a lot of seasonality with the car washes?
For sure. I think that's the hardest part to handle is the stomach. It's a roller coaster. It's a feast or famine business, especially here in the Midwest in the wintertime, which is really your best time. But you can have, one December, we crushed it. We had, huge sales. The weather was right. People were in the right mood and the streets were clean. And then the next December, it was like freezing cold, snowed every other day, and you don't wash cars. If it's raining, snowing, or below zero, we don't wash a car. And so you can have a day where it's, record income, and the next day it's like somebody shut the faucet off. And so that's the hardest part, I think, in that business. But for all intents and purposes, it kind of normalizes out if you look at a quarterly basis, not so much at a granular daily level, which I still do. But yeah, I think depending on the markets and the regions, I'm sure there's seasonalities, there's weather-based factors that are really going to contribute to how your business performs on a regular basis.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm kind of curious. Like, so when you say self-serve car washes, those are the ones with like, you got the wand, you're spraying it down, and then the soaping brush thing. And is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely.
So how do you keep those from freezing?
So all of our bays, we have garage doors on both ends. And so at our locations, they're called a tandem. So you can fit 2 cars in. One guy pulls in, the next one behind him. And so they've each got their own pumps, their own coin boxes and all that stuff. And we have in-floor heat. And so up here, it's really common to have the whole concrete foundation has tubes of basically antifreeze water running through it. And you've got a boiler in the middle of the building that runs heat through that whole floor system. And so we've got, makeup units that hang from the ceiling if we need to really try and pump some heat into the building fast. But by and large, we keep the floor at, 65, 70 degrees throughout the winter time. And so it keeps the buildings, in general, about 55 degrees, even if it's 0 outside. And so that's really what keeps everything operational and not freezing up.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, I talk to laundromat owners a lot of times, and like, I don't even know how you keep water from freezing in your pipes. Like, I genuinely don't know. I had a buddy who we were jumping on a call, and he's like, dude, I got to reschedule. I just had a pipe froze and burst. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, really. Like, I got ice in my drinks, and that's about it. So
that's where it's fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, it sounds like the car wash side of it is, maybe even your favorite part of this thing. Do you also have the touchless?
We do.
So you have self-serve and the touchless and the tanning and the laundromat.
Yep. In those locations.
How does your touchless car wash do versus your self-serve car wash?
Revenue wise, it's up. I would say it probably does. I don't know. It's hard to compare because each location has a different number of bays. One has 1 bay of self-serve, the other and 2 bays of touchless automatics, and the other is kind of inverted from that. So I would say, it does a little bit better because your average ticket in an automatic or a touchless bay is say $10 for every car that comes through. Whereas you'll have plenty of people that come in and do self-serve, and they may just want to clean off the salt and stuff in their car. So they just come in and spray everything down, and they spend $4, $5, something like that. So your per ticket is higher on a touchless automatic bay, but you probably on an average day you might pound through more cars in a self-serve. People that come in and just do a quick spray down, or maybe they wash their car and they do spend $15-$20 in the bay. But it's more expensive to do and install and run the touchless automatics. But the self-serves, they do really well. I would encourage anybody that's interested in that kind of business. I think it's nice because it's not so heavily populated with investor money, if that makes sense. You've got these publicly traded companies they have some pretty deep pockets, and they're putting up car washes on every corner, and they're multi-million-dollar sites with all the bells and whistles. And not many of them are investing really at this point in self-serve car wash systems. So I think it's a great opportunity for people. Yeah,
that's awesome. Very interesting business model. And when you were going to buy these, it sounded like the laundromat's kind of what drew you in, and then you kind of also just picked up the other 2 businesses versus, hey, I'm interested in the car wash and I'm grabbing the laundromat and tanning at the same time. Was that kind of the case?
Yeah, I was more interested in, and especially because of my business partner's experience and comfort level with the laundry side, I figured with his experience, and I was pretty confident I could pick it up, but I thought, we could get off to the races pretty quick with him on the laundry side. And then I would learn as quick as I could, both of us on the car wash side. And so that's really what we did. And we felt comfortable with the laundry. We had some good people in place. And so laundry basically kept us pretty confident right off the bat. And the car wash side was kind of drinking from a fire hose, making sure you could figure out and keep everything up and running.
Yeah. What do you think that you spend most time on? Laundromats, car wash, tanning?
That's a good question. Definitely not tanning. In terms of maintenance on a tanning bed, depending on your bulbs and your things, you change out light bulbs, depending on your area, maybe once a year. And it's, an hour job. And other than that, tanning beds are pretty maintenance free as long as you got, new enough equipment and they last a long time. Tanning beds, easy. Car washes, the newer the equipment, the less maintenance, like anything. But in general, I would say we probably are pretty evenly split between the car washes and the laundromat in terms of maintenance and where we spend our time on site, for sure. Yeah.
Interesting. What do you think is more profitable, laundromats or car washes for yours?
I would say when the weather's cooperative, car washes. When you go through a dry spell in the middle of summer and it hasn't rained in 2 weeks and, you got nothing, you really don't wash many cars. So depending on the location, I would say winter and dirty months, car washes. Summer and busy laundry time, laundromats.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, they're both, I think, pretty lucrative businesses to be involved in. So I think that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got these 2 laundromats / car washes / one with the tanning also. And then you ended up buying another one. How'd you guys find that one?
Yeah. So right after the first 2, within a couple of months or 6 months after that, my wife and I decided to buy one, just the 2 of us, because my business partner wasn't quite interested in this other location. And so her and I bought one together, and that was her kind of way to get her feet into it and see what she thought of it. And she does great. My wife was a graphic designer by trade, and she's been home with our kids. They're little, they're 3 and 5. And so she spent the last couple of years with our kids. And she's awesome at designing anything we need for the businesses, graphics, logos, art for the wall, things like that, signage. And so she's been a huge help with that one. And that one was really, we bought through Biz Buy Sell. And so we went through a broker, did the whole SBA experience front to end. And that was the one I've probably learned the most on in terms of things that I didn't know, going through some of the due diligence phases. And in hindsight, I complain about that one the most, I would say. I think in the due diligence, I feel like there was expenses that were undocumented along the way. And so you never saw it in returns. You never saw it in his P&Ls. And so I think there was certainly some expenses that weren't presented during the whole investigation phase, due diligence phase. Looking back, there was certainly some red flags I probably should have pumped the brakes a little bit harder on. But the other part of that process was that was right in the middle of 21, I think it was, or maybe it was 22, middle of 2022. And so when we started that process, rates were really low. And by the time we got through it all and got all the appraisals done and all the phase 1 environmentals, because we're buying the building, you get through all that. And now we're into rate hike season. And so the numbers that made really good sense at the beginning of this process started to dwindle. And I think if I was to go back and do it again, I don't know if I would have completed the purchase, if I'm being totally honest. It's working out fine. It's not cash flowing what it originally was intended to cash flow, but we're positive. We're not feeding into it, which thankfully, I've seen many people do it, and it's really unfortunate when it happens. But between the rate changes, the expenses that I don't think were presented up front, it just didn't become the business that we had originally thought it was going to be. And so that was a big learning experience for us, is knowing more of these details, more of these nuances along the way, some of the costs that were going to be a part of that buying journey. I certainly learned a lot from it, and we worked through with a couple different banks. And so I was exposed to more and more components, more angles, more thought as we went through that buying process.
Yeah. Well, that's really easy to happen, especially when you're buying a cash laundromat, right? That, one of the things I say is, if you miss a $500 a month expense or accumulation of that much, that's $6,000 a year that you're not putting in your pocket that you thought you were. But also, at a 4 or 5 multiple, that's 25 to 30 grand in equity that you're overpaying, that you lose pretty much immediately the moment you close. So it's like this big double whammy where you're losing cash flow and you don't have the value in the business that you purchased it at and thought you were going to have. So that's a tough spot. What do you think? What do you think you could have done to kind of sniff out some of these expenses, or do you think there was anything to do?
I think there was certainly things that, looking back, the seller that we were working with, when we wanted to, show me your bank statements, show me the transactions reports from month to month. And the reply at that time was, well, we have multiple businesses that use the same bank accounts. And so I'm not comfortable sharing that information. And at first glance, I thought, okay, well, that's understandable. And it became more apparent, afterwards that, there was expenses in there that I don't think were presented properly, like credit card fees. We knew, this location used credit cards, and we knew that there was some fees that are going to come associated with that. But a lot of that stuff wasn't presented and documented in a way that was really made sense, and we could document it and follow it right. And so there was certainly some of that. You're getting close to that $500 a month range where you're like, wait a second, that's $6,000 a year that was there, and certainly in the valuation phase of what that does to the number on the valuation side. So there's getting as much. I understand personal preference of not wanting to share some information. Banking is a part of it, and I know it's sensitive, but this is a big transaction and this is a big deal, and I think a lot of that should be probably pushed a little bit more diligently, of seeing exact records, tracing the financials through beginning to end. I probably could have found a little bit more from that perspective, for sure.
Yeah, and there's not really any laundromats that this is not susceptible for. Like, I just did a consulting call with a lady yesterday who was looking to buy a $1.2 million laundromat. We went through, and there were a few different things where the owner, they do wash, dry, fold, and the owner was like, well, the supplies aren't that much, so we just don't include those for the wash, dry, fold. And one of the expenses was labor. It was like $75,000 worth of labor that didn't include, right? And you're like, dude, this is a $1.2 million laundromat. I feel like you should have all the information that you need for that kind of laundromat, right? And so it's pretty prevalent right now, and it's easy to go wrong. And that's the lesson I learned the hard way when I bought my first laundromat, and I made all kinds of mistakes and lost 6 figures worth of money those first couple of years. And so you can go real wrong there. And fortunately for you, you're still in the positive, which is a good thing and can get you going. But it still is like a punch in the gut when you buy it and you find out, oh, this is not what you said it was, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the key takeaway from me after that really was, if I'm going to buy another store, I really want to have a better comfort feeling on the seller side. I don't remember the name. I remember one of your guests, I think it was a husband and a wife, and the wife had a much better sense of just comfort level and knowing this person feels kind of shady. I don't think we should follow down this path so far. And I think that really defined that for me after that one. And so the last laundromat that we've purchased, my business partner and I, was much more on that comfort level of, you go in the store, everything is super organized, super documented. The data made really good sense on the P&L. We were working through the same bank that he was banking at. And so the bank was comfortable with it, and their comfort level obviously gives you a little bit of a sigh of relief, knowing that, you've got somebody that, I'm going to ask you to borrow money for his business. You know what it does. So you know if this is a fair deal or not. And so that really made that transaction much more graceful. He was fantastic to work with. I'm very hopeful that we can buy more locations from him in the future, because they're hard to find. Like you're explaining, there's plenty of people out there that, number one, aren't always very upfront with a lot of the information, may not know all the information. I even ran into a seller a couple of weeks ago that a multi-store owner was looking to exit all of these locations, kind of that retirement phase, wanting to move on and be more hands-off and retire. And so I just asking very high level questions, what's the business worth? What's the cash flows, blah, blah, blah. And they threw out a number, and it was like, well, I was originally going to ask this, and then I realized I was only going to walk away with this much money. So now I'm going to ask this. And I said, well, does the business support it? And they're like, well, somebody's going to have to come in and put a lot of money down. And I'm like all of it? Because you're asking money that doesn't make any sense on these locations. And then it was a pivot of, well, this real estate is really prime real estate. You could probably turn this into something else or do this, that. And I'm like, I'm trying to buy a laundromat. I'm not looking to be a land developer. So there's a lot of those folks out there right now, I think, that are at that phase, don't really know how to value their business properly, don't know how to sell it. And even they might be a little creative on the wrong side of the math for the buyer side.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting you say that, because I just this week had a conversation. I'm looking to buy a portfolio, one particular portfolio of laundromats, more than 10 laundromats, and the guy basically said the same stuff. He has a number. It's a high number, and like more than 15 million for this portfolio and some real estate with it. And he's like, it's really not that much, because look, 50% is going to go to tax, and I've got this much money of loan payments. And I'm like, I don't really care how much, like, that doesn't, I don't care. I didn't say that to him, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, none of this is relevant to me. Like, is the business worth, this number that you're throwing out here or not? And to be determined on that particular one for me. And one thing that I try to remind consulting clients a lot too is most people who are selling laundromats, even if they're selling a portfolio of laundromats, it's their first time for the majority of people selling also. And this is something that we see this with homeowners all the time too, right? Like, it's their home, so it's more valuable to them than maybe what the market says it is. And this is true with businesses too. Maybe sometimes even more so, because they've literally sacrificed years of their life to build these portfolios or these businesses. And it's tough to give them up, right? And there's a lot of value in their mind associated with it. So that's definitely something I've encountered too. But it was just interesting that you described exactly pretty much what I experienced this week too.
Yeah, it's to your point. I didn't even really know how to gracefully reply to that in such a form of not being rude, but at the same time saying what you're explaining is not relevant to the sale of your business. Like, what you need and what it's worth appear to be greatly different figures. Yeah. And you're going to have to figure out which one of those makes sense for you. You either hold on to it till you're in the hole, or you just got to get rid of it and you move on. I don't have an answer.
Yeah. I mean, I think the play there probably is just smile and nod, and then try to get the numbers, and then make your offer based on the numbers. And you can explain, like, here's why my offer is what it is. And sometimes it takes like 3, 4, 5 different buyers to tell a seller, here's what your business is worth, before they finally are like, okay, I guess if I want to sell it, I got to sell it somewhere closer to this number. And sometimes you can be that 5th, 6th, 7th person to say it and get that deal. But it's tough.
It's a waiting game, I think, in some of those instances for sure.
Yeah. I wanted to ask real quick, going back to that third laundromat, one thing I thought was kind of interesting was that was the one that didn't go the way you had hoped, but is also the one that your partner wasn't interested in partnering on. Was there any correlation there? Was there something about that one that he was like, I don't want to do that one? Or was it totally unrelated to?
I think at the time it was more just the purchase price. He just wasn't as gung-ho to spend that much money on that site. That one was, a $1 million site. And at the time he was like, we just bought these other ones, north of that too. So I'm just going to sit tight for a minute. And so I was, at the time, I had just sold our portfolio of rental properties. And so I was looking at, where can I basically try and put the majority of that money in one transaction if I can. Yeah. And so that was easy for me as well, because I had the ability to put a sizable down payment. and he was like, I don't really even want to match half that at the current moment. And so he passed on it because there was other sites that we had our eyes on that he was more excited about. And he's probably coming out shining on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I just was curious if there was something in particular about that one that he didn't like. I've definitely multiple times have done deals, or not even just investment deals, but just other things where somebody who knows more than I do is like, that's probably not the best one. And I go do it anyways, because I'm the guy to do it. Right. So
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if that was the case there, or he just was looking at other opportunities. So interesting.
No, yeah. It was the other part that I think was a little bit, I don't know that the financial part was probably more of his decision influence. But this is in a part of town it's not as rural. It's not as much out in the country. You got a little bit different clientele. You've got I wouldn't say it's in a dangerous neighborhood by any means, but it's not quite as straight-laced, boring as some of our other laundromat communities.
A little more exciting.
Yeah. And there's some good competition in that area too. I mean, it's, where most of our other laundromats are, we've got one or, in one site, there's nothing. At our third site, there's one really nice laundromat and then some other, pretty rundown spots. In the state of Minnesota, we've got a chain, and, a lot of states have chains, but there's a chain of stores called Tumble Fresh, and they're owned by a family, an investment group family that owns a lot of gas station convenience stores. And so in our area, I mean, they are like the Cadillac of laundromats. They have the benefit of having a big structure behind it, a big organization that has in-house marketing, advertising, a lot of understanding of how to get in front of the right customers pretty efficiently. And they build an amazing store. And so they're the benchmark here in my eyes. I mean, they've got a store that it's like walking into your favorite gas station, where they've got all the conveniences, all the neon lights, the signs. They've got a full kids play area. You can buy lottery tickets in a vending machine. And so, we've got some of that competition right down the street from my wife and I's store. Ironically, we have one in our last store that my partner and I bought, but I look at them as the benchmark, and I'm trying to make sure that we can provide an experience very comparable to them, because I think they do a great job.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think modeling after, the best that's just a recipe for success. If you can do, and obviously you want to have your own, your own brand and your own spin on it, and you don't want to necessarily copy, stroke for stroke, but finding that model and taking that model as best you can and making it your own that's a great way to go.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, before we move to the next segment here of the podcast, do you see, I mean, since that third one is a little less rural, I guess,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of differences between sort of that laundromat and your other ones that are a little more rural?
I would say there's way more opportunity there. There's other competitors in the area. And so what it really drives is every customer, I feel like, has to have a great experience every time they visit. Because if they don't, they've got great options to go elsewhere. And so it's been really important for us, and really at the same time difficult, to provide a consistently great experience at an unattended laundromat. And so, knock on wood, all of us are in that area, in that really busy non-rural area. We're all unattended for the most part, but they do a great job. And so it forces us to, not like I ever want to have a dirty store or an unkept store, but you really need to stay on your game, and you need to make more cleaning staff visits, more promptness to make sure that the store stays in a state that people are really happy to keep visiting. So there's more opportunity there, but it does come at a higher cost of operation for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I get asked a lot about, those rural stores and if they can be profitable. And, but it sounds like, I mean, from you and from other guests we've had on the show, got some laundromats in more rural areas, like they can be great stores. So
yeah, for sure.
Cool. Awesome. All right, we got a segment of the podcast called Down to Business, where we dig just a little bit deeper on your businesses there. Number one, can you give us just a little bit of a rundown of like these acquisitions? Like, what did they cost? I know you sold some real estate to help acquire them. Did you also pair that with loans? Can you tell us a little bit about the acquisitions?
Yeah, so we've done, I would say the low end of our acquisitions is around 800, and the high end probably was my wife and I's store. That was around 1.4. The other ones were kind of right in the middle somewhere because they were blended. So it's a little bit more difficult to decipher what each component of that would have been priced wise. But right. We've done SBA, we've done conventional financing. The SBA, if you've got the patience for it and you've got the timeline flexibility, you've got the opportunity to come in with a pretty low down payment. That's the benefit to it. And in most cases, you've got some more preferable rates, in my experience. But if you have the ability to do something more conventionally and you got a good bank that you're willing to work with, and you can make a deal happen fast. I would say on the SBA perspective, I don't think I've gotten anything done in under 6 months. From a conventional perspective, I think we did 2 months, maybe 45 days. And so that was timeline wise, conventional, it's the way to go. But you're bringing 10% to 20% down. I think 2 out of the 3 actual purchase transactions, we did use some seller financing or some seller carrying of a component. So we will provide some down payment. I actually feel a level of comfort when the seller is confident enough to be a component of the financing. It doesn't have to be a lot, even if they carry a 10% note on like a 5-year term or something like that with a balloon at the end, or however they want to structure it. If they're willing to keep some skin in the game, I feel comfortable that this thing isn't going to go sideways because they gave me a bunch of incorrect data. That's my experience. I don't know if everybody shares that same feeling, but I like the SBA. I hate how long it takes.
That is
we've got really good. Side. Yeah, we've got really good small banks by us with I think that's a really important component for people that are interested in doing these things is having that relationship. And I've heard some of your guests talk about, they got to bang down 30 doors before they get somebody to crack one open. And I'm assuming it's that way pretty everywhere. But around here, we've got some pretty good banks that are very excited to invest in small business. And they kind of jump at the opportunities and they're good with these types of cash businesses. They don't have a problem with you bringing in lots of cash every month or buying quarters, and they're not charging you an arm and a leg for them. I think the opportunity to bank with a Wells Fargo or something, a big institution like that, I don't know that it makes sense on these kind of businesses. I think, most times you got to find a more town-based or locally based credit union and a bank that has some appetite for small business.
Yeah. Did that third laundromat, the one that you bought with your wife, did they carry anything at all?
He didn't. No. So that seller was another red flag. He was looking to exit, and he had a component of his structure was carried by the seller that he bought it from just a couple of years prior. So he was looking to exit and invest in some other real estate based investments. At least that's what he told us. And so he didn't have any interest in carrying any component of that. And so we just did it all with down payment and SBA.
Yeah. Interesting. Gonna have to hunt that guy down, slap him down a little bit.
Lots of red flags.
Yeah. What does it cost to do laundry at these mats ish? And like I'm kind of interested in, are they priced the same in the rural versus the less rural areas, or how are you handling that?
We do. So I would say the folks like in some of our smaller rural stores, they probably complain a bit because they feel like our prices are a bit escalated compared to some of the others in the area or adjacent towns, I should say. But my perspective on that is you can go to those stores, half the equipment works, and the half that does work is 100 years old. And so you're getting what you pay for. So we try and provide more of a higher end experience with modern, more up-to-date equipment and things that we keep up really well. So I think in what I've heard from some of your guests, I think our vend prices are probably a little bit high. You know, a 40 pound here is $6.25. You know, we're pretty well across the board around 14 cents a pound. You know, you get in a 90 pound washer and you're 12.25, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Cool. And their prices are the same in all your stores?
All of our stores.
How does your price in your less rural one, how does your pricing compare to that nicer one that's down the street?
I try and stay a quarter cheaper just because my footprint is way smaller. I've got less folding room. I've got less room for customers to just comfortably seat around the area, you know, less amenities. And so I think, you know, we keep a really nice store. Our equipment is always working. You know, it's rare that we have anything down. The equipment on the wash side, I'm usually within a quarter, 25 cents of all the wash side. The dry side is where I'm not quite as high as the real premium stores. You know, those guys around here, it's very common. I'd say it's almost rare to do not a full cycle dry. Everybody does full cycle dries at this point. So, you know, for like a 50 pound dryer or even like an 80 pound dryer, you know, we're like at 325, 350 for 30 minutes, 32 minutes. And these big stores are like 575 for 32 minutes. So they're definitely charging a premium on the dry side, I think. And so I don't know, maybe I could charge more, but there's other competitors that are very similar layout and products as mine that we're really competitive with each other in the pricing side. So they're kind of on their own premium island on the dry side, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, interesting. And they're way up there too.
Yeah,
250 higher. That's a lot.
It is. It's. I would love to be able to charge that, but I just don't feel comfortable with it.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of like how each of these mats perform, like in terms of turns per day?
I would say, like in my wife and I store, you know, we're between 3.5 to 4 turns a day, depending on the season. You know, in the busy season in the summer, you're around 4. In the winter, you're probably 3 to 3.5 turns a day, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So, and very similar in most of our other stores. I think it's pretty common up here.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's right in that wheelhouse too. Are you running them attended, unattended? I know the one in town is unattended.
Yep.
Are they all unattended?
Everything else is unattended. Yep.
Okay.
We have a maintenance at one of our other locations. We have a maintenance guy that's there. 5 or 6 hours a day. But that's more. He spends way more of his time on the car wash side, like cleaning out the pits and washing down the walls from the self-serve bays and things like that. Emptying garbages. It seems like every time somebody washes their car, they think they need to bring 10 bags of garbage with them. So there's more effort in terms of that around those locations. For sure.
People just driving around with a bunch of trash in their cars.
For sure.
Did you add card readers to the laundromat side or no? Are you cool?
So my wife and I store, we have card readers on everything, and we're a hybrid store. We have coin and card. I've gotten a good amount of experience having all these different stores. My wife and I store, it's 100% Dexter equipment with spider wash readers. We've got other stores that are all Maytag equipment. And then we've got another store, it's all Continental equipment. We have fast card readers at one store on everything. And we also have Kiosoft at another store. And so we've kind of been able to learn from all of them, kind of see what things we like and don't like about them. And so that's been good. I think I feel a lot more comfortable as we go to build out another store, which direction we would go and try and familiarize and build a platform that you've got the same in every store. I think that's, for me, it's important as you grow to try and have some consistency across the board if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. So now that you have gone full time, maybe unwillingly, but maybe destiny, you know, how much time are you spending on all these businesses that you got now a week?
I would say right now, I mean, I've got one location that I maybe visit 2 hours a week. The store that my wife and I have, the only reason I've been there a lot is because we're putting up some tile around the walls and trying to, you know, enhance the interior of that store. But in terms of physically being there and doing, laundromat related day-to-day activities, it's a few hours a week. The car washes, again, we're in our busy season. So, when it's freezing cold out, you got garage doors that stick open or stick closed, and you got more activity around that. So I kind of spend a day at each location. I'll drive out and do those. Those stores, they're an hour away from my home. So I make a day journey out of that. I drop the kids off at the bus in the morning and then go work at the stores for the day and come back and be home in time for dinner. So that's kind of the majority of it. And then other than that, being kind of mechanical, if anything breaks, I like to bring it home, fix everything I can myself. I bought, majority of our stores all have Hamilton changers. And so, for consistency purposes, we got tons of extra hoppers and validators and all that stuff. And I'm on one of the auctions around the area, I bought a Hamilton changer. I've got it in my garage. And so I can fix hoppers and test all that stuff at home before I ever go back to a site. So that's probably as much of my time as playing with that stuff and doing a little maintenance even here around home.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah.
All right. We got another segment of the show called Secret Sauce. And that is, what's your best tip for somebody who owns a laundromat now, or maybe something that's working well for you, they can implement in their business?
I would say for me, whether you're really mechanical or not, get to know your equipment as best you can. I think in today's world right now, the cost of everything is so high. Anytime you've got to call somebody out to repair something, I mean, at least out here, it's like $120 to get somebody to show up, and then $100 and some an hour. I mean, you're hundreds of dollars into a job before they get anywhere, really. So, download the manuals, play around with, there's a lot of stuff on these products that's pretty easy to change. I mean, on a Dexter washer, you can, after you change one water valve, you can have it down to a 10-minute job pretty affordably. I think right now, until hopefully things kind of normalize a little bit, the cost of repairs and the cost of upkeep, it really drives somebody to, it's a big advantage if you can fix little things on yourself, on your own. You're going to save hundreds of dollars every month just by being able to fix some little stuff.
Yeah. Awesome tip. And, the other bonus of that is that you don't have to wait for a repair person, service tech to come out and, try to fix it. And then they don't have the part that they need. And so they got to come back and your machine's down that whole time, right? It's just stuff to fix, especially if it gets quick. You got it up and running, making money for you again real quick. So,
yep.
Awesome tip. We got another segment of the show called Pro Tips, and Pro Tips is for the newbie, the person who's out there listening to you right now, getting inspired. What do they need to know before they buy their first laundromat?
I think the biggest kind of, even for myself, as we grew into this and even getting to this point. So, I've been in this for, 3 years now. The question I think I bounced around myself, I see it in a lot of the groups and boards, things, is should I build or should I buy? And personally, I would always recommend you buy first. And hopefully you're buying a good store at a decent price and things. But the reason I say that is if you're going to build your first store, you don't know what you don't know. And so there's a million things that can go into making a store really nice, really functional, really well laid out that you won't know until you've operated something for a while, or whether you've had a couple stores or you spent a lot of time in it. So if you haven't spent a lot of time in laundromats, I would recommend buying something. I mean, even if it's a fixer-upper, you're going to come out way better on your next store if that's something you want to pursue. I think you're way more informed if you give yourself a little bit of runway. Give yourself some time to experience it, find out what equipment you like, things you do, you don't like, layouts, all that kind of stuff. Even down to like painted floors or tile floors. There's a lot of things that you can make the wrong decision and then you end up costing yourself thousands of dollars a year later to do it over again. So that's my tip, is that fits in your wheelhouse and learn. Give yourself some time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. The question I get asked a lot about also on the buy versus build. And, I like you said, there's just a lot that you don't know. You're trying to go build a laundromat unless you've owned one. And you mentioned, I can't remember if you just said it right now or if we talked about it earlier, because we talked about this a little bit. But if you don't know what you don't know, then you're relying on somebody else to tell you the things that you don't know. And you said, whether they're right or wrong, they make the right or wrong decisions, they're getting paid and you're dealing with the consequences. So you want to know kind of what you're walking into. So
right.
I thought that was
their check's going to clear and they're going to be on the road and you've got to live with it. So hopefully you've got some good input into what the decisions are.
Yeah. All right. Final segment of the show is called Recommended Resources. And hey, you got any resources that you can recommend to help us grow ourselves personally or our businesses?
Yeah, I would say, I certainly listen to the podcast. I think this is a great opportunity. There's so many awesome guests that you have on here, present company excluded maybe, but
included.
I think there's
included.
But there's, you get such a great variety of people that have been 20 years in the game, a year, 6 years. So there's so many different perspectives that you get there. This is a great one. I think that there's a lot of Facebook groups. You can go out and type in laundromat owners, laundromat buyers, laundromat equipment. There's a million laundromat related groups on Facebook. And you can be as active or as passive as you want, but you can just sit in there and see the questions that people ask, see the answers that are provided, people's experiences. There's some really knowledgeable people in a lot of those groups that are very willing to share, their experience and try and help people. I think it's a pretty warm community all in all of people that, they know it's a kind of a niche business, so to speak, but they're all pretty accepting and hopeful that everybody that's a part of these is successful. So I think, just get out there, read a bit, learn a bit. There's plenty of opportunities for you to find what you're looking for. And you may even just have to ask the question and see what people say.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think any ways that you can connect with other owners or other people who are also trying to buy laundromats, I think that is great, whether that's listening to them on the podcast or interacting on the Facebook groups or, doing a local meetup or joining a mastermind group or whatever it is, like getting together, sharing ideas, sharing what's working for you, what's working for me, what struggles I'm going through, what advice do you have for me, what advice do I have for you? You go farther, faster, in my opinion. So incredible advice, incredible episode. Loved the story of how you got into this business, and love to hear that you're killing it over there. And I know you're still on the prowl for locations and building your empire over in that neck of the woods over there. And very do not want this to drop off the table. Very interested in figuring out how we can raise top loaders at some point. So that we need to make happen one way or another. Last question I have for you is, hey, if people are wanting to take your advice and connect with other laundromat owners, what's the best way they can connect with you?
Yeah, you can shoot me a message on my email. I'm pretty responsive on email. Just Mike at Royal Wash House. I'm pretty connected and happy to try and help if I can.
Awesome. Well, Mike, this has been an awesome show. I appreciate you so much for coming on, sharing your story, sharing a ton of just practical wisdom. And we got into things that we don't get into very much or ever, car washes and tanning beds, which was a fun one for me to kind of dig into a little bit. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing, and looking forward to staying in touch and hearing the progress of that empire that you're building over there.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
All right. Hope you love that episode with Mike. Huge shout out once again for Mike to coming on and sharing his story, all his hard-earned wisdom, and some cool experiences too. So hopefully you got something out of that. Like I say every single week, listen, none of this matters unless you do something with it. So take some action this week. Pick one thing, put it into action, go share it on the forums to keep yourself accountable, to encourage each other.